Known as a daily occurrence at school. We brush situations of abuse at school aside, labeling them as kids will be kids. But what if 78% of that bullying could simply stop? Our names are Mariana Hernandez, Kayla Aguirre,
George Titus,
and we have been doing extensive research on the topic of gender identity. People deal with gender expression in different ways, but all the different reactions come from the fact that we are not taught the specific differences between gender and sex. This following video presents the differences between gender and sex.
Simple video to explain it. Gender versus biological sex. Biological sex has to do with the science within you and your parents. It's completely out of your control. Biological sex has to do with your private parts or your genitalia. It's in between your legs and is different depending on your sex. When you're a baby, the doctor looks at you and can tell whether you're a male or a female. However, gender is very different. Gender has to do with how you feel here, inside your head. Gender has to do with your thoughts and how you want to act. You can be feminine or masculine or neutral. Gender and sex are both a part of who you are, but always remember, gender is up here and sex is down here. Very different things.
Gender identity and the way we address it affects students negatively from a very early age. We can all fight for gender inclusivity and help the many kids who are discriminated because of something they can't control.
The genderbread man represents different levels of a person's identity. A person's gender is based on how they feel. The person's feelings are how you think about yourself. The next part of the genderbread man is attraction. The heart represents who you like and are attracted to. Attraction is who you have romantic feelings for. Who you are attracted to is not something you can control. The third part of the genderbread man is sex. Your feelings and who you are attracted to are not necessarily affected by your sex. A person's sex has to do with biology. It is your physical body and genetics which come from your parents. The last part of the genderbread man is expression. A person's expression is how they let others know about themselves. Expression has to do with portraying your gender to others. Some ways people portray their gender is by the clothes they wear, the way they speak, the way they like to style their hair, the habits they have, such as hand gestures, and the types of hobbies they have.
For our analysis, we concluded that the problem is very complex, and the discrimination that follows many individuals who identify as transgender and non-conforming is daily and a life-changing experience. After the extensive research, we also concluded that the main source of this problem was the fact that gender identity is not taught at schools. However, when gender identity is introduced to students, it is often on the basis of stereotypes and generalized ideas of how a girl and boy should act.
According to Child Development Encyclopedia, a class with more gendered terms such as boys and girls, and who were told to line up by girls and by boys, were more likely to stereotype their peers, and this can affect their behavior for a lifetime. According to Kimberly Kelsey, a gender rights activist and writer for the Huffington Post, they experience a daily discomfort of having to correct people. Even though this is not an extreme case, it still shows how every person who is gender non-conforming is affected just because of the way they are, that we are taught to address someone. Based on these two articles, we can deduce that the problem is how we are exposed to gender. The things that we are told in school at a young age stick with us until adulthood. We then are taught to believe that such teachings are acceptable and end up offending other people. Whether we bully someone, misgender someone at the store, or offend someone we care about, all these are examples of the negative effects that this problem creates. In order to solve this problem, we created 3 criteria. Those criteria were that our solutions had to be inclusive, informative, and easy to understand. This is a video that explains these 3 criteria.
For our criteria, we decided to have three main standards throughout our presentation. First, we wanted our presentation to be inclusive. We want to make sure that we don't offend any one religion, even those that have negative viewpoints on gender fluid people. We know religion plays a big part in some people's lives, and we don't want to offend them. We also do not want to offend any particular person of a certain sexual orientation. A person's sexual orientation is a very personal topic that some may find to be sensitive, so we plan on being very respectful and mindful of others. Our second criteria is to be completely informational. We plan on only using cold, hard facts, and we leave our objective thinking and personal feelings out of it. We cannot be objective in anything we say in order to make things easier to understand for those whom have thought a certain way for their whole lives. From the moment we are able to understand, we have been taught that to be the same despite what we think. People's objective thinking on gender has restricted children from gender nonconforming. Our third criteria is to make it comprehensible and easy to understand, so that even little children can grasp what we are saying. In short, we want our presentation to be inclusive in order to not offend anyone, informative so that our viewers have the right idea to what we're saying, and lastly, easy to understand so viewers of all ages can comprehend what we are saying. In order to get our point across, we need to make it easy for everyone to understand. Concepts such as the fact that gender is what a person feels is right to them, and a person's sex is their physical body. In order to do this, our solution has to be inclusive, informative, and easy to understand.
We also created a video to explain our different potential solutions. Inclusivity is a very important criteria that we need because of the conflict that arises between gender nonconformity and religion. We had to keep in mind the majority of the United States who is of Christian faith. Christianity bases their rejection of people who identify as transgender and nonconforming on the Bible. Many other religions also make campaigns which argue against the rights and protections of gender nonconforming individuals. Another very important criteria is that it is informative. There can't be any objective information because of the fact that many people have conflicts with the idea of gender. Our potential solutions had to be kept easy to understand for the many who grew up believing that gender nonconformity is wrong.
Potential solutions. Number 1. Simple inclusion of topics like biological sex, gender, sexual orientation, and thorough diagrams and videos. Number 2. Lesson plans on gender fluidity, biological sex, science-based behind topics like sexual orientation and gender versus sex. However, there should be increasing complexity as the child gets older. Number 3. Trainings on gender identity for students, teachers, and parents.
We have decided that extensive lesson plans on gender fluidity, biological sex, and the science of sexual orientation throughout the grades with increasing complexity as a child gets older was the best idea.
This was because, according to the GLCEN Model District Policy on Transgender and Gender Nonconforming Students, a good policy for such students would include gender-inclusive language and gender-inclusive dress code, as well as the many other things that we base our decision on, such as lesson plans on gender fluidity and biological sex. Also, according to Thomas Aberle, principal of State Public Elementary School, making his school's policies more gender-inclusive decreased the amount of verbal harassment and physical harassment that occurred at his elementary school. According to both of these sources, students are more than capable of understanding ideas such as gender. If ideas that are more complex, such as biological sex and sexual orientation, are introduced later on in their educational path, then they will slowly but surely grow up to be more accepting.
In conclusion, our problem was 1. Very complex, 2. Incredibly important because this affects people's daily life, 3. And it stems from the fact that we are not taught about gender from an early age. We based our solution on 3 very important criteria. 1. Inclusivity, 2. Informative, and 3. That it was easy to understand. Following this criteria, we chose 1 out of these 3 solutions. Teaching kids a simple understanding of gender terms, lesson plans with an increasing level of complexity per grade level, and training for teachers, students, and parents. We believe that the best choice, and the one that followed our criteria the best, was the lesson plans about gender, sexual orientation, and biological sex because of the increasing complexity, which would benefit the student. Let us leave you with this. 78% of students who identify as transgender or nonconforming are verbally or physically abused with transphobic and homophobic language while at school. The only way to fix this is through education.